What's going on? Welcome to Unwrapping the Industry, our interview series. Today we're joined by Frank from Find Your Trove. It's one of the best media outlets in the sports card space. I personally love it because of the rich storytelling. They do a good job of finding cards and then breathing life into them by telling the stories behind them. There's of course investment advice in their newsletters and in their videos, but there's also so much great storytelling that you guys, if you don't follow Find Your Trove, you need to check them out. And we're also teaming up with Find Your Trove to give away up to $1,000 in sports cards. We have awesome prizes from sealed hobby boxes to signed rookie autographs that are graded by PSA. And all you have to do to enter to win is watch to the end of this video for more instructions. Now let's bring in Frank. Frank, man, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited. I've been a fan for a while, and it is going to be awesome to talk and learn from you. So could you tell us how you got started in Trove?
Yeah, so I got into sports cards around early 2019 when I was starting out in college. I collected as a kid. My dad was a big collector. But middle school through high school, I kind of fell out of it. I was actually, really into flipping sneakers and that kind of stuff. So I always had a collector mindset. But it wasn't until I got early on in college when I heard Gary Vee making videos talking about Giannis prism cards jumping from $50 to $300 when he was having his first MVP season. And I collected cards as a kid, and I thought it was a fun hobby, but I had no clue that people could actually make money flipping these cards, especially just based off of player performance. So that drew me in. That was the 2018 cards, like the Luka, Trae Youngs, all those guys were just coming out then. So I was buying, Trae Young, just base prism, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I had no clue about like parallels, all the different releases. I was just buying simple base cards, but I was seeing that if a guy had a 30-point game, this card I just bought for $10, I can now flip it for $20 on eBay. So I had tons of fun with that. I was doing that, from my dorm room in college, 2019, 2020. And then it wasn't until the NBA bubble, which was when everything up until then, 2019, 2020, everything just went up. It was like impossible to lose in sports cards, it felt like. But then when the NBA bubble happened, what I noticed for the first time was that cards didn't only go up forever. So that was, I remember like Giannis, Damian Lillard, all these guys that were getting super hyped up before the bubble, but didn't have the best performances and their team didn't make it super far. And then their cards started to tank. I remember both of those guys, we were seeing their cards drop 50%. So I was like, I love cards, but, maybe flipping and dealing cards isn't my best path in this industry. And at the exact same time, I was starting to realize, what's potentially an avenue I could be in that I could be successful in. And I found that to be content because, when I was entering the hobby, whether I was searching for YouTube videos or articles, there wasn't really that much stuff out there for me to find on why are cards from this release more valuable than a different product? And, what types of parallels should I be looking for? What is overpriced, underpriced? And also just like the history of the industry. Why is this card from the 1930s worth $1 million and this other card's worth only $5? So I wanted to be someone that could make content like that. I started off, with a daily newsletter in late 2020. And then after a few months of doing that, people loved it. I then started making videos and, we fast forward a few years with Trove, and it's a real business. We have a full team helping us create content, and it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And you talked about history, so that really struck a note with me because one thing that Trove does better than anybody in the business is breathe life into like the narrative of cards. You're good at finding a card and not only talking about its value, but giving it a story. So you seem to be a storyteller. Can you talk a bit about like what got you interested on focusing on that particular aspect of the business?
Yeah, when I first started in content, it was all just about, pricing and stuff. So that was like our daily newsletter and a lot of the early things we were posting on Instagram and such. It was just talking about this card's got up this percent this month, this card's down. But then I felt like a lot of people were doing that. And at the exact same time, I was, naturally just from being in love with the industry, hearing some stories of, incredible finds from the 70s and 80s. And somebody finds 50 Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps cards. Or why is this one card so valuable? And I started making videos just telling the origins of cards and telling the rich history behind, collectors who secretly had massive collections that weren't found until they passed away or whatever.
You've heard about the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card before, but have you heard the story behind why this card is so iconic? Mickey Mantle was seen as a superhero, so when we're talking about arguably the most collectible baseball player of all time being included in this iconic 1952 Topps set, which is the greatest set ever created, it's the perfect storm to create a card, especially when we look at this Mantle card in really high grades, having a super low supply. It creates a situation where everybody wants it and there's virtually none of them available in the market.
And people really love that. And nobody else was really making that storytelling type content. So we started to go really hard on that. I'm happy we did, because at the end of the day, I like to say that collectibles are tangible pieces of history. And with that, like, people really need to know the stories to make that history be valuable.
And
so I think that's what we provide.
You do a great job, like I said. That theme of tangible pieces of history is just very apparent in your content. So I really encourage the CardLine readers and followers to go check it out. But you do numbers too. You're definitely a numbers cruncher. For example, I'd love to talk. We had, just a couple of months ago, we had this Babe Ruth rookie card sell for $7.2 million in auction. I know you covered it. We covered it. Would love to hear your thoughts on that card, or even something like how you think it would have done in the past. How's the industry moving and changing there at that high-end level?
Yeah, so I guess some background for that card, for people that may not know of it. It's the 1914 Baltimore News Babe Ruth rookie card. It was from when he was with the Baltimore Orioles in the minor leagues before he started playing the majors with the Red Sox. There are only 10 known copies of that card to exist. The one that surfaced, it was sold by our partner, Robert Edward Auctions, early December. It was the first one to be sold in over a decade. It's the highest graded SGC copy. So this was an absolutely massive card, by far the biggest card to hit auction in 2023. So I thought the $7 million sale was great. It's the most expensive sale we've ever seen outside of the T206 Wagner or 1952 Topps Mantle. And what makes this card interesting is, the T206 Wagner, you even look, that card came out in 1910. In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the Wagner was always the biggest card in the industry. And then, by 1952 Topps Mantle comes out, by the 80s, 70s, that card was already seen as super, super valuable. But the Babe Ruth card, even though it came out in 1914, people didn't really know it existed. It didn't have like a traditional way of, being in packs or anything. So people didn't even know about this card really until like the 80s or 90s. So it didn't, especially between that and the rarity, we never really hear sales about it or people talk about it. It's not seen as iconic. So I thought it was really cool to see such a massive sale because, through the storytelling and people realizing this is Babe Ruth's first card. It came out before he was in the majors. It's incredibly rare. Something like this will not surface again for a decade. So I think seeing people bidding $5 million plus for this piece shows that there's a lot of people who saw this as a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it shows, I think, a really healthy hobby in the high end.
Absolutely. The high end is really looked promising. We just were working on an article that I mentioned earlier, just talking about how the high end cards, like you said, when everything shot up in 2020, they shot up, but compared to the other industries and modern cards, they've stayed afloat at a significantly higher plateau. So it really does seem like high end cards are really, really promising. What other just general industry trends have you observed? What are you buying personally? What would you encourage somebody to buy if they had $100,000 to throw at sports cards right now?
So I guess the one tip, and I think this is especially true, for people that might have whatever your budget. Maybe it's $100, $1,000, $100 grand, million. There's all these different types of people that we see entering the industry, and people are always asking, for advice. How do we get started? I think the best thing you could do is genuinely take a step back and learn a little bit first. And, before you just run and spend $100 grand on Brock Purdy cards right now, you should look and see, what were the price fluctuations with, Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow cards a few years ago, right? Like their cards came out, they were super valuable, but, what were the reasons why their cards may have dropped? And why did some cards continue to go up and some other ones didn't? So I think it's about being patient. But regardless if it's modern or vintage or whatever, I think the number one tip always is just to be buying things that you don't see surface often. So, you even look at someone like Jordan. And we recently did a piece on this where you look at his 86 Fleer rookie, that thing at a PSA 10 was nearly 800 grand. Now it sells for 150,000. He has a bunch of other cards that you look at, they may be down, but then he has other cards I think it was his 1997 Platinum Portraits. It's like a pop 15 and a PSA 10. That card sets a new record every time it sells. You see one every like 1 or 2 years, but the sale that just happened this year, PWCC sold one for about 80, 90 grand. That's more than what it was selling for in 2021 when the market, in a lot of people's eyes, was at its peak, right? So if you're buying stuff that never surfaces and it's something that's in demand, where it's a rare card of a Michael Jordan or even modern guys now, if there's a Brock Purdy card that never surfaces, if there's, a basketball guy like Luka that never surfaces, those cards are still going to perform great. The problem lies in cards that it's a base prism or it's a silver prism, and 5 of them end on eBay every day. And it's hard for those cards to ever skyrocket because once they start going up a little bit, everyone just floods the market with them.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And I really like, I'm sure you've personally seen it, I definitely did, your advice on before you go big, step back and learn. Because especially in 2020 when all that new money came into the industry, it seemed like a lot of people came very hard and didn't necessarily do their research beforehand.
Yeah, and I think especially a myth that was being told a few years ago for all these people entering the industry was that it's just like sports betting and player performance is the only factor to consider, right? But that's not true. Like you have, Prism football that just dropped, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but you have Puka Nacua base Prism selling for $20-$30. He's awesome, right? He just broke the record for most receiving yards by a rookie. But if you look at last year's release, or 2 years ago, Jamar Chase's base Prism ungraded is selling for $2, right? So I don't care how great Puka is. His cards are, when you fast forward a year or two from now, that card's not going to be $30 and Jamar Chase's is $2, right? Jamar Chase's is $2 because there's literally 100,000 of them out there and nobody's really fighting over it. So you could buy that Puka card for $30, and even if he wins Offensive Rookie of the Year, he ends up being the best wide receiver in football, the Rams go deep in the playoffs, that base Prism isn't going to hold long-term value regardless of his player performance. And I think that's where people really get burned, because when people enter the industry, they get lied to that that's the only factor. When obviously scarcity, there's a lot of FOMO, a lot of different narratives that bump up card prices outside of performance.
Agreed. And like you said, it's almost to oversimplify. It's basically just it's core supply and demand. Like, don't buy the base prisms when at least you got to look at the parallels or something. The PSA population report's a pretty good launching pad to just kind of reflect what's out there and what's rare, because if it's not going to hit the market as much, it's going to hold its value a lot better than these Puka base cards that are just flooding eBay right now. 100%.
Yeah.
And talking about just the turbulence of the space right now, maybe not turbulence, it seems like it's settled some, but there's a lot of changes, a lot of large shifts in the industry, largely having to do with the Topps Fanatics takeover. So I'd love to hear just general thoughts on Topps Fanatics taking over. As most of our viewers know, the NFL and NBA cards moving forward and where that's going to head.
Yeah, so I really like it for the long term. I think Fanatics is going to do a better job than Panini did. We see stuff like the Taco Fractor stuff that Fanatics and Topps are doing with baseball cards. That was cool. The Wembanyama experience with Bowman Chrome. Everyone that had the green refractor got flown out to San Antonio for free to meet Wemby, and one of them was going to get the special inscription card. So I think Fanatics is already doing really cool things. You obviously have the Brady Bowman baseball. I thought that was a really innovative idea. And now Fanatics has LeBron autographs, which we haven't seen in forever because he's been exclusive with Upper Deck. The only negative I see to the Fanatics top stuff right now is the fact that they're signing a lot of exclusive autograph deals. So we're not going to see Wemby autos in Panini products. We're not seeing, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, those guys. They don't have autographs in Prism right now. They haven't had autographs in any recent releases because all these guys are Fanatics exclusive. So with Panini still being the company making basketball and football cards for 2023 products, we're missing out on a lot of autographs of top guys, which is unfortunate to say. But once all that stuff gets settled, a few years from now, Fanatics and Topps is running everything, I think it's going to be good. I think they're showing that they're willing, to step outside the box, try new things, and create new experiences for collectors, which I appreciate.
They have definitely been innovative, like you said, and you just kind of open another can of worms that I wanted to talk about too with Prism, but also just the current state of Panini cards, because there's so many, like you said, there's so many autograph-driven products. Like, I wrote an article, a review of Absolute Memorabilia this morning, and you don't really open that packed to hit anything but autographs or national treasures, these high-end cards, and you don't have a chance at pulling a Stroud, a Bryce Young, a Will Levis, all these people that have worked exclusively with our friends at Topps and Fanatics. So what do you think? First, let's start by asking, what do you think are the brands to invest in long-term for football this year? And then I want to talk about, in particular, Prism, which has just been the hottest drop recently.
Yeah, I think, especially with maybe shifting over to Fanatics Topps and assuming that, Fanatics doesn't buy out any IP from Panini and, Prism's going to be dead and Natural Treasure's going to be dead. I would say those two are the biggest. People like Flawless because there's a lot of game used stuff compared to National Treasures. However, NT is the most iconic high-end release, and it's just what people just naturally go to. The true RPA out of 99 is the RPA. The NT Logo Man or the NT Shield 101 is the big high-end card. And then for flagship, it's Prism. Optics Select, all these different releases. Kind of feels like they've been watered down over the last few years. So look, I'm thinking 5 years from now, the cards that people are going to be nostalgic about, I feel like it's going to be the Black Prism 101. It's going to be the Gold Prism out of 10. It's going to be the NT True RPA. So I think, those are the cards that people are going to miss. Same way that, people have missed tops from Superfractors and stuff. So I would say, Prism, NT, those are the two big ones for me that I think collectors will miss the most because, a lot of those lower end releases, I feel like a lot of parallels and they don't have as much history in the space.
It's definitely a nostalgia-filled industry for sure. You hit the nail on the head there. And when you're talking about Prism and how to invest in it right now, like we said, it's a hot release. So if somebody's new to the hobby and they know there's a lot of buzz with Prism, how are you investing? Boxes? If so, what kind? Singles? Say more on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, so look, opening boxes is a gamble. Can't lie about that. And it's a bigger gamble than a lot of people probably realize. So look, if you want to open up a hobby box of 2023 Prism football, if you pull the one-of-one black finite Prism of CJ Stroud, you're talking about a card worth upwards of $250,000. So you spend that $700 on a hobby box, it's an incredible investment. Problem is, the odds of hitting that is like winning the lottery. Right. So if you enjoy ripping boxes and, I know collectors, rip them with their friends, with their dad and stuff. If you love the experience of ripping and you want to rip, understand there's a big risk. And if you don't want to rip and you just want to run to singles, I would say if you're looking at, base prism, silver prisms, and, you just want those cards because, you might have a smaller budget. I would wait on singles for those. If you're a collector that is in the market of buying cards under $100 for singles, I wouldn't run and buy a Puka card right now. I wouldn't pay $50 for a CJ Stroud base Prism. You're better off waiting a few months. Those cards will probably, the Stroud's $50 right now. It's probably going to be a $10, $20 card by, I don't know, the spring, right? The only thing I would say for singles that makes sense right now is if there's a guy you really love and rare cards of his are surfacing and you're scared you're not going to be able to get your hands on it, right? So if you're, I don't know, a Sam Laporta collector and one of his big numbered card surfaces and you want to grab that now because you're scared another one won't surface, then go do that, right? But if it's outside of the really rare stuff that you're scared you won't see, I would hold off. And same thing with people for opening boxes. If you open a box and you do pull a numbered card, it's probably more valuable now than it will be in a few months because of all the hype right now. So potentially there is a path if you're opening boxes today. If you pull a numbered CJ Stroud card and you could be the first person on market to, grade his camo prism and get a PSA 10 and have the first PSA 10 on eBay, you could potentially have a good flip.
That makes sense. That's awesome insight. And I think it's cool to watch. I don't know if it's necessarily healthy to watch, but just as those Prism cards hit the market and then the market gets flooded with them, inevitably they're going to start dropping. But the prices that those numbered ones demand right off the rip can be eye-opening. Do you remember, I'm sure you do, when LaMelo Hoops rookies were selling for $200 when they first hit eBay during the bubble? It's ridiculous. That card's like a 75-cent card now, but it's the demand over the time as it has changed and the market in general has just been pretty wild. And now I want to step back. Even we're talking about rookie cards. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on prospect cards, because we see a lot of prospect investing within the baseball space. Particularly, we have a lot of Bowman Chrome, Bowman Draft, the chase for the first Bowman card, and now with Topps taking over the NBA and NFL cards in the coming years, it seems like they're making a move, at least to me, to really build up the prospect investing aspect of those two sports. We see Bowman Chrome University in both basketball and football, and they're encouraging people to go after these first Bowman cards, and we've seen some growth in it early. But do you think this is just a short-term phenomena, or do you think this could be the direction of football and basketball cards too?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say the player I'm looking at right now in that whole space is Caleb Williams, because I'm actually surprised what his cards are selling for the Bowman autos, because, this is the biggest quarterback prospect we've seen in a while, and his cards aren't going crazy. I think like the red auto or the orange auto, those cards are sounds like a few $1,000 I'm seeing for the biggest sales, but you can get a lot of, Caleb Williams Bowman autos right now is under $1,000 compared to when his actual cards in the NFL come out next year. Those are going to be cards selling. He's going to have tons of cards, obviously, selling for six figures. Even base autos from small products will be selling for thousands of dollars. So I'm surprised to see that a lot of collectors aren't trying to buy that stuff right now. And I think the big reason why they're not, to play devil's advocate, is the fact that it's just not in the pro uniform, right? For that's just been the thing with college releases. People like to wait. People don't want to see Caleb Williams in USC. They want to see him in a Bears uniform, right? So I guess the fear is if you're buying that stuff now, when all the releases come out, it's just not going to be the card the same way. But that could change, So
Absolutely.
if you believe that, like first auto, like this is his first signed card ever, and it could be a good play looking long term, because a lot of collectors aren't fighting over that stuff right now, which is surprising to me, because when Caleb Williams gets NFL licensed cards, even the base cards are going to sell for a ridiculous amount of money, right? But right now, you get a lot of his autos right now for way cheap, rare autos for way cheaper than you probably will, base and not big cards down the line.
Absolutely. And I think that we talked earlier, obviously, about the exclusion of the big quarterbacks from this year in the Panini sets. So do you think that bodes well for CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, that their first Bowman autographs could be worthwhile in the future moving forward? I'm particularly or personally looking at some of those cards. And I know you mentioned another CJ Stroud rookie autograph that is maybe under publicized, but something that you have your eye on.
Yeah, so CJ Stroud, he only has one real, one of one black auto, right? I think it sold for that it was the draft day auto or whatever it was. I think it ended up selling 2 or 3 times over the summer. And I think the last time it sold, it went for under $5,000. I think that was back in August or September. So that is way more valuable now than it was. And I think that's a great point with, if it's Caleb Williams, who I keep using as an example, if he doesn't have autographs and Panini products next year, if he's Fanatics exclusive, which he already may be, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We're not seeing his autographs, right? So if you're talking about those rare first Bowman autos, what happens next season if he's balling out? Those are going to be the only autographs you could be looking at, right?
And so, like you said, so many collectors care about the NFL threads and having them in their pro uni. But a lot of collectors would prefer that personal touch of an autograph, I think. To me, I'd much rather have something that's signed than a picture of them in their pro uni. And it's a personal taste thing, but I think you're right on point there.
Yeah.
So another controversial figure for this NFL season is Brock Purdy. And we've seen some movements that you and I talked about before we even kicked off the interview with his high-end stuff. And I'd love to resurface that conversation for you to weigh in a little bit on the NFL's most controversial figure, Brock Purdy.
Yeah, so I'm pulling up the number. So Brock Purdy's biggest card in existence is his 1-of-1 Platinum Shield RPA from National Treasures. So that card sold back in October for $122,000. When it sold, it was his biggest card sale yet. And that is his biggest card in existence. So you would think nothing would sell for more. However, it wasn't the best timing because end of October, if you remember, when that sold on the 28th, the Niners had just lost back-to-back games when Purdy had never lost in the NFL before, and they ended up losing that next game too. So Purdy's cards actually started to tank a little bit in the middle of the season, and whoever bought that card for $122K, they bought that when Purdy hype wasn't going crazy. Now you fast forward to December 21st, and PWCC sold another one of his National Treasures cards for $186,000. So Purdy mania is going back. Niners keep winning. They're the 1 seed. They're winning every important game. And now the person that bought the Platinum Shield for $122 saw a different Purdy card sell for $186,000, and now they just put it back on auction, hoping to make a lot of money on it. Right? You paid $122. What's it going to sell for now when that auction ends during the playoffs and the 49ers are in the NFC Championship game? So there is a lot of fluctuations, obviously. It's a risky game, but there's a lot of collectors and a lot of people that hate on Brock Purdy. Oh, he's all in the system, whatever. The card market is willing to spend a lot of money on him, and that's been obvious. He's had dozens of cards sell for at least 5 figures, and if they make the NFC Championship game, they make the Super Bowl, we are going to see some of his cards sell for higher than we've ever seen before.
I don't doubt it. And just to wrap up, this is a very vague one, but you said you've been collecting cards for a long time. What are 3 tips or a handful of tips that you would give to young collectors? What do you wish somebody would have told you when you're 10 years old starting your card collection?
Yeah, I would say genuinely find your niche, find your PC of stuff that you really like, whether that's, a certain player, maybe a certain product, maybe whatever. I think to go really deep into something is fun. And then I think, you find a community of similar collectors and, they can help you find those cards when they surface. I also just think buying rarity wins. A big mistake I made when I entered the industry was just the easy play was the base prism, the silver prism. But looking back, if I was, a little bit more educated and I was taking the time more, I could have been buying autograph cards or numbered cards. And those cards have fared much, much better over the last few years. So buy as rare as you can. If you, let's just say you have $100 to spend, instead of buying 5 different cards of a player, maybe just buy 1 card of that player and have it be a card that doesn't surface all the time. So if you do decide to sell that card one day, collectors are going to fight for it on auction or, however you sell it, and you could actually profit on it. I think that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. A lot of, particularly young collectors, myself included, for the longest time, really prioritize quantity over quality. And you can make more money. I think you see better gains on those higher end cards. They're also a lot less work. Like shipping those $5 to $20 cards, doing it over and over, it can eat up a lot of time. I think that is just expert wisdom for the young collector, and I know the people watching definitely appreciate that. So now let's wrap up this interview talking about the future of Trove, because I'd love to hear what's next. You guys have blown up, and give us a little peek behind the curtain. What's coming up down the pipeline?
Yeah, so sports cards are our bread and butter, obviously, but we have had fun expanding into other verticals of collectibles, whether that's game used memorabilia, tickets, sealed video games, whatever it is, or movie props. Like there's a lot of different collectibles that we're now working with our partners at auction houses and grading companies, trying to tell those stories, because incredible collectible stories doesn't only exist in sports cards. So that's been a lot of fun. And yeah, I think just rich storytelling wherever it comes.
Absolutely. And you guys do that so incredibly well. So again, if you're watching this video from the CardLines side of things, please go check out Trove. Give them a follow. They bring rich stories and bring these cards to life. Frank, thank you so much for hopping on this. Do you have any just closing words of wisdom you want to share?
Enjoy the hobby. It's supposed to be fun. It is really fun.
Beautiful. Frank, again, thank you so much for your time. Everybody go follow him and the Find Your Trove squad. And now, as I mentioned, we're giving away $1,000 of sports cards 6 lucky winners get the chance to claim their prize, consisting of hobby boxes, graded rookie autographs, and so much more. So how do you enter to win? It's very, very easy. All you have to do is follow CardLines on Instagram, follow Find Your Trove on Instagram, and then tag 3 collecting friends in the comments below after liking the post, and you are entered to win. So go to our Instagram right now and make sure you make that happen. Thank you so much for watching this video. Come back for many more. See you next time.